I partially blame the media for people's derogatory perspectives about black women worldwide. I'm not talking about the Beyoncés and Oprahs and Kerry Washingtons of the world. I'm talking about normal, everyday black women.
There's a saying, when the devil ignores you, then you know you're doing something wrong. Wait a minute, I'm not done now. The devil goes, oh no, leave him alone. Hey, he's my favorite.
Jay-Z, before his lawsuit, rumors, Jay-Z doing this, that, and the third. Bill Cosby, they were trying to start lawsuits against him for decades, but his image was too clean. If they just jump out and say Bill Cosby did this, it's just so out of nowhere, people be like, no, Bill Cosby would never do that.
He was supposed to be hey, white woman, and they tried to electrocute him, but it didn't work.
Long before any headlines hinted at tension, the murmurs lived quietly in barbershops and around dinner tables, passed in low tones, as if saying them too loudly might somehow give them more weight. Tyler Perry was called controversial, his storytelling labeled harmful by some, his creative process questioned in ways that never quite reached the surface of mainstream conversation. Yet none of it seemed to matter, because while critics debated, his empire only grew stronger, almost as if it existed in a completely different reality where success drowned out scrutiny. And for a long time, it truly felt like nothing could disrupt that momentum.
A lot of stuff that's on today is coonery and buffoonery. And I know it's making a lot of money, breaking records, but we could do better. That's just my opinion. I mean, I'm a huge basketball fan, and when I watch the games on TNT, I see these two ads for these two shows, and I'm scratching my head. You know, we got a black president. You know, are we going back to Mantan Moreland and sleep and eat?
But then, something subtle shifted, and it didn't come from social media debates or think pieces. It came from silence. Not ordinary silence, but the kind that feels deliberate, calculated, almost symbolic. When figures like Denzel Washington and Samuel L. Jackson chose distance over collaboration, people began to notice, not loudly at first, but enough to raise a quiet, unsettling question. What would make icons at that level step back? Because this wasn't about contracts or timing. It hinted at something deeper, something harder to define but impossible to ignore once seen.
Tyler Perry hates black women, and I'm not saying allegedly because the proof is in the pudding. It is becoming more evident that Tyler only sees black women as hardworking, struggling, great victims that of course one day are going to be rescued by a blue-collared black man. After watching the trailer of his latest film, Straw, starring Taraji P. Henson, I'm a little offended. And honestly, I'm still recovering from mea culpa. He has managed to make billions of dollars off the backs of black female pain, and I'm sick of it. The media is a huge outlet for the insight of others. I partially blame the media for people's derogatory perspectives about black women worldwide. I'm not talking about the Beyoncés and Oprahs and Kerry Washingtons of the world. I'm talking about normal, everyday black women. It is dangerous to continue to depict us in such a lowbrow manner. Looking at you too, Issa Rae, one of them days, really? Where's our Legally Blonde? Where's our Pretty Woman? Well, maybe not Pretty Woman, but you know what I mean. Even in movies where we should be happy and preppy, like Bring It On, of course we have to be the mean black bully cheerleaders. Do you know what type of message that's sending to everyone else? As a black woman, I am tired of being showcased as a bottom-of-the-barrel human being.
To understand why this moment carries weight, you have to look at the foundation Perry built, because it wasn't accidental, and it certainly wasn't random. His rise followed a formula, one that resonated with audiences, but also sparked discomfort among critics who felt there was more beneath the surface. And that tension, it had been there from the beginning, just waiting for the right moment to resurface. Which brings us to someone who has never hesitated to challenge narratives he disagrees with, Spike Lee. If you know Spike, you know he doesn't soften his perspective to make it more digestible. When he spoke about Perry's work, his words carried a sharpness that echoed far beyond a simple critique. He used language that, within the cultural context, felt less like criticism and more like a line being drawn.
It's not a biggest choice for others. I'm saying at the end of the day, Kevin doesn't have to worry about what people are going to say about him wearing a dress because of the long line of dress wearing people before him. So now we have Big Mama's house 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
I've never seen Medea in a pantsuit. I think she wears dresses. So now I'm saying, why are we picking on poor little Kevin Hart? Because it was his turn next.
Okay.
Some of us are against the Illuminati, and we are against the Illuminati at our own detriment. When people are against the Illuminati, then they get punched in the face all the time. The press hates them, and nobody likes them.
And yet, despite the weight of those statements, nothing seemed to slow Perry down. In fact, if anything, the contrast made his success even more intriguing, because how does an empire keep expanding while standing in the middle of such visible tension? That contradiction, more than anything, is where the real story begins.
I'm a conspiracy theorist to a degree. Like when I connect dots that maybe shouldn't be connected, I don't know. But certain dots, like when I see that they put every black man in the movies in a dress at some point in their career, I'll be connecting them down like, why all these brothers gotta wear a dress? That's happened to me. I'm doing a movie with Martin.
Yeah.
The movie's going good. So I walk in the trailer. I'm like, man, this must be the wrong trailer because there's a dress in here. They come in. The writer comes in. I think he's the writer. He's like, Dave, listen, we got this hilarious scene where Martin's sneaking out of jail. So he disguises you as a... and he put this dress on and, huh? What? The prostitute? Nah, I'm not doing that. I don't feel comfortable with that. That should have been in the discussion. What? You don't feel comfortable with it? I mean, it's a hilarious bit. All the greats have done it. So, well, if all the greats have done it, it's kind of hacky, right? You're right. So why don't we just not do it? Because I don't feel comfortable wearing a dress. Oh, come on, Dave. Listen, we got it all set up. We're supposed to shoot. Every minute you waste costs this much money. No, the pressure comes in. Huh. He said, I'm not wearing no dress, man. I'm funnier than a dress. Just give me something funny to say. I don't need to wear no dress to be funny. What am I, Milton Berle? You know, we're going like this. And then finally he's like, and he leaves. And then like the director comes, Dave, it really would be great if you wear the dress. What is wrong? What is this, Brokeback Mountain in here? So then, like, wear the dress. I don't want to wear the dress. I want to wear this dress. You know what I mean? This is, oh gosh, it's so difficult. They leave. Now the producers comes, come on, David, would be so great. I mean, and then I started thinking about it. All the comics that I've seen, man, you know, strong brothers, why they be putting us in these dresses? But the minute it was clear, I was adamant, I'm not wearing a dress. I'm not wearing the dress. All right, fine. Think of something else. That comes back 10 minutes later, the whole new scene. Damn, how did you write the scene so fast?
As Tyler Perry Studios continued to expand and the checks from Hollywood kept arriving, it created a quiet contradiction that was hard to ignore. If the criticism was so persistent, why didn't it leave a dent? Why did it seem to dissolve the moment it brushed up against his success? That's where the conversation takes a turn, because the next voice doesn't come from a red carpet or a director's chair. It comes from someone outside the spotlight entirely, a perspective grounded not in industry politics, but in lived experience. And somehow that made it land even heavier.
There's a saying, when the devil ignores you, then you know you're doing something wrong. Wait a minute, I'm not done now. You know, the devil goes, oh no, leave him alone. Hey, he's my favorite. Don't you bother him.
Yeah.
Conversely, when the devil comes at you, maybe it's because you're trying to do something right.
There's a different kind of weight when the frustration isn't filtered through fame. When an everyday person speaks, especially with emotion that feels raw and unpolished, it carries a kind of honesty that's difficult to dismiss. The words weren't framed like a critique of cinema. They felt more like a reflection of identity, of recognition, of asking why certain portrayals feel uncomfortable instead of empowering. And in that moment, the conversation subtly shifts from, is this good filmmaking, to something far more personal. What does this say about us? That question lingers longer than any headline ever could. But just as that perspective begins to settle in, another voice enters the picture, louder, more unpredictable, and impossible to ignore.
Meet the Browns was the most stressful and hardest thing that I've ever done in my entire life. I had no idea that Tyler Perry Studios' schedule was so drastic. If you're working on a regular network show, they take a whole week to film an episode. Tyler Perry Studios, they film an episode in one day. The character was Jeffrey, a fat high school teenager who was very intellectual, who was getting bullied at school. I take 2 to 3 days to learn the entire script. On the day of filming, first thing we do is a table read. I know all of my lines. I'm ready to go. So the director, who is Alfonso Ribeiro Carlton in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, he starts to block us, telling the actors where to go, where to stand. Mr. Perry comes in, everything changes. So we literally run the entire episode for him, and he hates it. Does that mean I have to learn a whole new script? Yes, that's what it means. Mr. Perry, on the spot, starts rewriting the entire script, and he's feeding me the lines to say, and the director is kind of standing on the side like, you better do it, because if not, they will fire you. Here is where the shoe hit the fan. So in the middle of Mr. Perry changing up the scenes, he says, you know, I want Jeffrey to be gay, and he has a crush on his bully. That's not what I auditioned for.
When Cat Williams spoke out during that viral interview, it didn't just spark conversation, it reignited suspicions that had been quietly circulating for years. And while some of what he said sounded exaggerated on the surface, there was an underlying idea woven into it that kept people listening a little longer than they expected. Because sometimes it's not about the claim itself, it's about what the claim is pointing toward. And then, almost like a parallel thread running through the same story, you have Dave Chappelle, someone who approached the same topic from a completely different angle, yet somehow arrived at a similar place. His decision to walk away from an enormous opportunity has been discussed endlessly, not because of the number itself, but because of what it represented. It raised a quiet but persistent question. What kind of system asks for that kind of trade-off in the first place? And more importantly, who benefits when those lines get crossed? Because when you step back and look at all of these voices together, the pattern isn't obvious, but it's just visible enough to make you wonder if it was ever meant to be. They're pointing towards something uncomfortable, an idea that success doesn't always follow the clean narrative we like to believe in.
I remember the person that I wanted to impress the most was Mr. Perry. I always looked up to him, and he was just sitting on the side looking at me. He was just looking at me, like waiting for me to do something. I felt like he was about to fire me. Everybody's expecting me to pull something out. They don't even let me finish the third take. They're like, cut, we need to reset. So at this time, I just kind of black out, and I get so angry and frustrated in the moment that when they call action on the fourth take, I lose it. I'm screaming, I'm yelling, I'm crying. Not because I was acting, but I was feeling those emotions because of how overwhelmed I was.
Not just talent, not just effort, but sometimes a series of decisions made behind closed doors, choices that never make it into interviews or acceptance speeches. And in Dave's case, the story becomes even more striking, not because of what he did, but because of what he refused to do. That contrast alone starts to reshape the question we began with, pulling it into a space that feels less about careers and more about quiet lines people choose not to cross.
I find it weird how whenever he came out, people was talking about him, people was disrespecting him. Tyler Perry was doing everything in his power to have him on mute. Now a white man is coming out, now it's more important. Oh my gosh, Tyler Perry him. What about Christian? Nobody's talking about Christian, are they? I genuinely find it weird how black people ignore the fact that people who are rich, black people who are rich, they get rich off of the backs of us, and we continue to support their behavior. They have money to quiet people, and we continue to support their behavior. And then years and decades later, here come the Diddy case. I don't want to hear about it because y'all have seen the things that has happened to black people, but y'all only care when it's a non-black person.
And suddenly, that original question, why figures like Denzel Washington and Samuel L. Jackson would keep their distance, doesn't feel random anymore. It starts to feel layered, like the visible explanation is only scratching the surface of something more complex. When you connect the criticisms from Spike Lee, the emotional weight in that woman's perspective, and the broader concerns raised by voices like Cat Williams and Dave Chappelle, a different picture begins to form. Not a clear one, but just defined enough to make you pause. Because this stops being about film preferences and starts leaning into something far more abstract, something tied to values, identity, and what people are willing to stand behind. Then the conversation takes an even more unexpected turn, one that moves beyond industry mechanics and into something more philosophical, almost spiritual in tone. Because when Denzel speaks, it's rarely just about the surface level issue. His perspective often carries a deeper lens, shaped by belief, discipline, and a long-standing awareness of the pressures that come with influence. And when someone like him frames success not as validation, but as something that should be questioned, it subtly flips the way you interpret everything else you've heard so far.
Before it started, he was already accused of doing something he shouldn't have been doing. There were rumors floating around that Tyler Perry was pressuring people to watch Netflix with him forcibly. If you don't know what that means, look in the comments. Now, this is important because rumors are how these big cases get started in the first place. If you think about Diddy, rumors for years that, Diddy was doing Diddy things. Jay-Z, before his lawsuit, rumors. Jay-Z doing this, that, and the third. Bill Cosby, they were trying to start lawsuits against him for decades, but his image was too clean. If they just jump out and say Bill Cosby did this, it's just so out of nowhere. People be like, no, Bill Cosby would never do that. And your lawsuit's gonna kind of fall by the wayside.
There's a moment in one of his talks where he reflects on the idea that ease isn't always a sign of alignment. It can sometimes signal the opposite. That thought alone introduces a kind of tension that lingers because it challenges a deeply ingrained assumption that smooth paths mean you're doing something right. And when you quietly place that idea next to the stories of people who stepped away, spoke out, or faced resistance, it creates a contrast that's hard to ignore, even if you're not sure what to do with it yet. It doesn't prove anything outright, but it does invite a different kind of question, one that feels a little more personal. And then, just when the conversation feels abstract, it narrows again, this time into something more direct, more human. Because principles are one thing, but personal experience is another.
The people who actually own the entertainment industry, they not gonna allow Tyler Perry to make movies about black women winning in life. Cause the higher ups, the government, the world really don't like black women. And they wouldn't dare want black women to get inspired or... That makes so much sense, girl. You just made me think about it.
When someone at Denzel's level hits at a moment that felt off, something that didn't sit right on a professional or personal level, it carries a different kind of weight. Not loud, not dramatic, but firm. And in an industry where opportunities are rarely turned down without reason, even a subtle refusal can speak volumes, especially when it comes from someone who has seen everything there is to see. What makes the situation even harder to unpack is that on the surface, everything continues to work in Tyler Perry's favor. His films generate consistent revenue, his shows keep getting renewed, and his presence in Hollywood remains firmly established. So it raises a quiet but persistent question. Why would someone like Denzel Washington, a figure who has collaborated with some of the most respected directors in cinema, feel no interest in stepping into that world? It's not a casual decision. When someone with that level of experience chooses distance, it usually comes from a place that goes far beyond preference.
Tyler Perry and Tyler Perry Studios are now being accused by one of their former actors, Braxton Wells, of covering up his NSA by one of their top executives. Braxton Wells is a former actor from the series Ruthless, was also featured in The Oval. Sound familiar? As you know, it was just last month that Derek Dixon sued Tyler Perry for $260 million. Well, apparently, Braxton Wells settled with Tyler Perry Studios back in October of 2024, not that long ago. He accused Tyler Perry's senior vice president of him and NSAing him. He also alleged that Mark Swinton drugged him allegedly. Mark is on the left. He's worked with Tyler Perry for multiple years, probably like 15 plus years on scripted television projects and movies. So Braxton Wells on his social media shared various videos, screenshots, and even his settlement agreement where he settled with Tyler Perry Studios, Tyler Perry, and Mark in this settlement agreement, which he also signed a non-disclosure agreement. In the settlement, he received $500,000. However, $201,000 went to his legal team. However, he's claiming that he felt like he was misrepresented by his legal team. He says that Derek Dixon's attorney, he had reached out to him before the whole Derek Dixon of it all, and he refused to take his case. However, wants him to be involved in Derek's case. It should be noted that Braxton is a former Army vet, and he says there were certain things because he's a vet he should have been afforded when it comes to his rights. He also filed a police report in regards to this. He had posted, even before he posted here, he had posted before he made the settlement with his claims. He believes the attorney that represented him were in cahoots with Tyler Perry and Tyler Perry Studios. Braxton also believes, even though he signed the settlement agreement and there's a non-disclosure within the settlement agreement, he believes that it's voided because he signed that under duress. He's believing that his legal team misrepresented him. He believes that they were working with Tyler Perry's legal team against him. But here's the thing. Although people settle for a variety of different reasons within the settlement, it does say that they do not claim Tyler Perry Studios, Mark, or Tyler Perry. They do not claim any responsibility or being guilty of what he's accusing them of. However, like I said, people settle for different reasons. I just don't understand why you would settle when your senior VP is being accused of R-ing someone. According to Braxton, he alleges that Tyler Perry and Tyler Perry Studios are covering up for a predator.
One theory that's been circulating doesn't point directly at Perry as the sole architect, but instead reframes him as part of something larger. And the more you sit with that idea, the more it starts to shift the narrative in a subtle but unsettling way. What if the real story isn't about one individual, but about a structure that operates behind the scenes, a system where influence flows from places most people never see, shaping outcomes in ways that feel organic on the surface, but are anything but underneath? It's not a confirmed reality, but it's a possibility that keeps resurfacing in different forms. Because when you look at the trajectory from extreme hardship to extraordinary success, it almost feels too precise, too accelerated to fully explain on effort alone. And that's not to dismiss the work, but to question the environment in which that rise happened. Denzel, with decades of experience, would likely recognize the difference between something that grows naturally and something that seems assisted. And if his reaction carries a moral undertone, as some suggest, then it introduces a deeper layer, one that isn't about scripts or roles, but about alignment and principle in a space where those things aren't always visible.
This person was with me for years. He was claiming, that he had multiple young black men on the payroll, and they just had to show up when he requested them to be there. And clearly that's why it felt to him that it was okay to say these things. And I want to have these discussions. I want to be transparent with y'all about that. I've done my best to forgive this person, but it happens. It happens. It's not just women that have to deal with it, but it's also men sometimes. And it'll be men tempting men. And that's why a lot of my posts over the last few years have been about taking the scenic route, taking the long way around, because if that means that you can carry your integrity with you.
But then the conversation shifts again from theory into lived experience, because it's one thing to speculate about systems and influence, and another to hear directly from individuals who claim to have been inside that world. When someone like Brandon J. shares his perspective, it doesn't come wrapped in industry language. It comes across as personal, reflective, and at times difficult to fully process. And whether every detail is accurate or not, the emotional tone alone adds another dimension to the story that can't be easily dismissed. What lingers most isn't just what was said, but what might still be unsaid. Because if even a fraction of these experiences reflect a broader pattern, it raises a question that doesn't have an easy answer. How many others chose silence instead? Not because they had nothing to say, but because saying it might come at a cost. And in an industry built on visibility, sometimes the most revealing details are the ones that remain just out of reach, quietly shaping the narrative from behind the curtain. What starts as a quiet question quickly becomes something far heavier.
How many people are still choosing silence, not because there's nothing to say, but because the cost of saying it feels too high? In an industry where access is everything, even the possibility of being shut out can be enough to keep stories buried. And when that silence stretches across years, it doesn't just protect individuals, it protects entire narratives. That's where this situation begins to feel less like isolated concern and more like a pattern that's been sitting just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to be noticed.
Once the started, I was like, well, I got to protect me because I'm saying no, and I don't want this person, as powerful as they are, to try to get in the way of my work. So I started recording. So I have them offering me money to take my clothes off. I have recordings when I wasn't working with them or for them. I have recordings of them confessing that, the other guys that they have on the payroll, all of the above. And the difference is, the wonderful thing about confidentiality agreements and non-disclosure agreements is that they can't prevent you from turning all of those things over to the police, because there's a crime. Attempt is a felony. And Tams, you literally just asked, why do we as Black people have to deal with that? But sometimes it's our own people. Sometimes it's our own heroes. Sometimes it's the very people we deify. And we look up like, oh, they're doing so much. No, they're also doing this.
Because alongside the conversations about art, faith, and creative differences, there's been another layer, quieter, more cautious, and far more difficult to address openly. It's the kind of discussion that rarely makes it in the headlines without resistance, often dismissed before it's fully heard. And when someone points out that similar claims in the past were overlooked or minimized, it forces an uncomfortable reflection. Was it the timing that changed, or the willingness to listen? That tension alone adds a weight to the story that doesn't easily fade. When people reference earlier voices who tried to speak out, the implication isn't just about what was said, it's about how it was received. Accounts that once seemed to disappear are now being revisited under a different light, raising questions about how credibility is assigned and who gets the benefit of the doubt. And while none of this confirms any single narrative, it does highlight a recurring dynamic that shows up across industries. Stories often gain traction only when supported by something tangible. Until then, they exist in a kind of limbo, heard but not fully acknowledged. And then comes the shift from whispers to documentation, the point where conversations begin to carry a different kind of gravity. Because when individuals step forward with detailed accounts, whether through legal channels or public statements, it changes how the situation is perceived, not as rumor, not as speculation, but as something that now requires attention, scrutiny, and a fair process to determine what's real and what isn't. When individuals like Christian Keys suggest that there are records, patterns, and multiple voices involved, it introduces a level of weight that's difficult to ignore, even for those who were previously dismissive.
Meet Derek Dixon, a man who's suing Tyler Perry for $260 million. Now, he's suing Tyler Perry for something called quid pro quo. Listen closely. Quid pro quo basically means if you do something for me, I do something for you. But see, a lot of times it's not that simple because there's an unspoken flip side. If you don't do this something for me, who knows what's gonna happen to you? Now let's get a little deeper into the story. Now this is all alleged, so pretend I'm saying alleged in front of anything. Okay, so Derek Dixon said, look, he's working at a party, right, as event staff. Tyler Perry's at that party. He said, oh, who that? He goes up to Derek Dixon and says, hey, you wanna be in some movies and stuff? Derek Dixon said, oh man, this is my big break. Tyler Perry must see something in me. Now, thing is, to the public, Tyler Perry is known as a really nice guy. So Derek Dixon is just automatically assuming that. So Tyler starts texting him like, hey bro, like you good? Like what's going on? Derek said, what's going on with me, man? I just be chilling. Tyler Perry said, chilling in your new car, look outside. Derek looks outside. Derek got a new car, courtesy of Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry said, matter of fact, you trying to act, right? Derek said, yeah. Tyler Perry said, come on my new show. Derek said, man, this dude is locked in. And suddenly, Tyler Perry start texting a little weird. Sending a bunch of texts, calling all the time. Derek like, damn, slow down, broski. And Tyler start coming on a little strong, start getting a little bit inappropriate. Derek said, okay, let me just ignore this. It's all gonna go away. Tyler said, hey, come to the crib. Derek said, what? Tyler said, what? You work as event staff, right? Derek said, yeah. Tyler said, yeah, come to the crib. As event staff, bro. Come as event staff. So Derek comes to the crib. Everybody drinking, everybody having a good time. Derek drinking. Everybody leaves. Derek about to leave. Tyler says, no, you've been drinking. Derek says, yeah, that's true. Tyler says, you can just stay at my guest room. You good. Derek goes into the guest room. He don't got no pajamas, so he wears his underclothes, goes to sleep. Somebody climbs in the bed next to him. Hello, it's Tyler Perry. And you ain't heard me say it started to get wicked yet. We just getting started. Tyler Perry started grabbing on bro. Derek gets up. He says, yo, chill out, man. I don't really do that. I don't do that. Tyler says, oh, my fault. Derek said, all right, bro. Tyler said, all right, bro, I'm gonna catch you. Tyler leaves. Tyler then texts Derek. This is the next day. Tyler says, look, bro, I got a new show for you. Now, here's where the stakes get raised. Right now, Derek has got a small part in one of Tyler's smaller shows. After this incident happens, Tyler says, look, I got a bigger show for you in a bigger show. Derek says, all right, I'll do it. So Derek Dixon gets a part on Tyler Perry's show called The Oval. Whole time, Tyler Perry's still texting him, saying, see, if my friends do stuff for me, I do stuff for them. Quid pro quo, remember that. Now let's look at the flip side of quid pro quo. At the end of the season, Derek Dixon's character, who, side note, is a professional Netflix watcher who would do anything for money, that's his character gets pew, pew, pew.
What makes this feel familiar, though, is the pattern itself. Stories that once struggled to be heard suddenly resurface with more clarity, more detail, and more people willing to step forward. It raises an uncomfortable but important question. How many moments like this were overlooked simply because they didn't come with proof at the time? And when those same concerns return, now backed by documentation or legal action, the narrative doesn't just continue, it evolves into something far more difficult to contain. That brings us to the current legal situation involving Derek Dixon, whose lawsuit has drawn significant attention due to the level of detail it reportedly includes. Allegations described within it point toward a misuse of influence tied to professional opportunities, claims that, if proven true, would reflect a serious breach of trust within a workplace environment. At the same time, it's important to recognize that these are still allegations, strongly disputed by Tyler Perry's legal team, who maintain that the claims are unfounded. And right there, in that tension between accusation and defense, is where the truth will ultimately have to be determined. But when multiple accounts begin to echo similar themes, whether through testimonies, interviews, or legal filings, it naturally leads people to look for patterns. Not conclusions, not assumptions, but patterns. Because patterns don't confirm guilt, but they do invite deeper examination. And for observers, especially those who have followed the industry for years, it creates a sense that something larger may be unfolding beneath the surface, even if all the details aren't fully visible yet. Which brings everything back to the quiet decisions we started with, those moments where certain individuals chose distance without public explanation. When someone like Denzel Washington, known for his discipline and personal code, consistently avoids particular spaces, it doesn't feel accidental, it feels intentional. Not loud, not accusatory, but deliberate. And whether that choice was influenced by personal experience, principle, or something less visible, it adds another layer to a story that already feels deeply complex. So now the question isn't just about one person or one case, it's about the system surrounding it, an environment where success, influence, and accountability don't always move in the same direction. And as more information continues to surface, one thing becomes clear. This isn't a conversation that fades quickly. It lingers, it evolves, and it forces people to decide what they believe, and more importantly, what they're willing to stand behind when the full picture finally comes into view. Comment below with what you think is really going on. Leave a like if this gave you chills, and subscribe, plus turn on notifications if you want to see more Hollywood secrets.